When I was 16 years old, 9/11 happened. One of my earliest memories from those immediate weeks after that day was when my 12-year-old sister came home upset because there were two boys from her school who threw small pieces of rocks at her and while calling her Bin Laden's daughter. The next week, while I was crossing the street, a man came up to my face and sneeringly asked, "What are you, an Arab?" That question, "What are you, an Arab?" implied answers. Answers that would later justify firebombed mosques, bullied children, a Muslim registry of over 100,000 people, the full use of the most powerful military in the world against a poverty-stricken country. The crushing weight of that self-answering question this man was asking me was just too much for my 16-year-old, then 100-pound body to go up against. So I responded with no and walked away. And ever since, I've hated that one moment in my life because I acted from a place of fear. I responded from a place of, how do I just get away from here without getting hurt? Not only did I respond with fear, I also responded by throwing another group of people under the bus with that no. My response would have been met with approval by the middle and upper class Desis men, those self-proclaimed leaders of our community, who, in spite of knowing about the attacks on our communities, told us to keep our heads down and stand by the patriotism. For those of us who may not be familiar with the term Desi, Desi is used to refer to people of the South Asian diaspora, like myself. I remember the violence that was inflicted on us on 9/11, and the violence that continues to infect us to this very day. Whether it was the wars in Afghanistan or Iraq, or the several countries we've drone bombed or sent troops into or supplied arms to since, or the raids and deportations or violent acts of Muslims or people thought to be Muslim, we've been at a fever point with this infection for years. The fear, uncertainty, and isolation that I felt in those days are things that are very much still a part of me today and the community that I'm so fortunate to organize. When those two planes struck the Twin Towers and the World Trade Center came crashing down, so did any illusion of safety and belonging for the 16-year-old Bangladeshi Muslim girl that was me. These memories I'm sharing with you are memories that were transformative moments for me. Moments that have changed the makeup of who I am, where coming out of them, I was not the same person going in. Another one of these memories was 2 months after 9/11 when my guidance counselor came into my English class because our English teacher was upset that most people in our class were not standing up to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So my guidance counselor stood up in front of our class of 25 black and brown students right before the Pledge of Allegiance was about to begin, and she said the following: "I don't understand why all of you do not show the respect our country deserves. Everyone here should put their hands on their hearts and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the country that feeds you, clothes you, shelters you, and protects you." And within a few minutes, the Pledge of Allegiance came on, and every single student stood up, faced the flag, and said the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone except me. That moment was not only incredibly infuriating for me to have to hear these words from my guidance counselor, words that were just so sharply different from the reality I and my peers were living. It was also incredibly awkward because my seat in that classroom was in the back of the class, directly underneath where the flag was hanging. So I stayed seated and was stared down by that room of students and my angry white guidance counselor and teacher. Stand by the patriotism, stand for the flag. What they were really saying was, be grateful for your seat at the table, even when you're also on the menu. And that was a parameter set for me and everyone else. You know, the idea of resistance was not to be entertained. I was expected to believe that submission was safety. And in those dark days during high school, a book landed in my hands from my AP US history teacher, Mr. Salick, and the book was A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. who, by the way, is still the only white man I have ever cried over when he died, when he died in 2010. Despite the horrors it describes within its pages, like genocide of indigenous populations, the enslavement of Black people, Japanese internment camps, Jim Crow laws, this book was oddly calming for me, and it changed my life. For the first time, I understood that what was happening to me, my community, and people of all oppressed communities was not happening for the first time at all. That this book gave me the clarity I was looking for, that the racism carried out through mass detentions, deportations, imprisonments, surveillance, wars, were very American patriotism and white nationalist-driven traditions. But it wasn't enough for me to know this. It wasn't enough for me to know what the problems were and why these problems were wrong. It was because I wanted to do something to replace my moment of fear and isolation with infinite moments of courage and community. And even when I knew what I wanted, I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know where to even begin to look. That is until I came to DRUM, Desis Rising Up and Moving, when I was 17 years old and joined as a youth member. DRUM is an organization of 4,000 members, and it organizes to build the power of working class, Indo-Caribbean and South Asian immigrant and workers, both youth and adults, to fight for justice. And I came in through their summer youth program because I wanted to not be at home for the whole summer and just to try something new before I had to leave home to go to college. And ironically, there was a DRUM flyer for their summer youth internship in my school's guidance office. Because buried treasures are always found in the most unlikely places. And at DRUM, it was the first time I was in a place with other young working class brown women like me. Their parents, just like my parents, were taxi drivers, restaurant workers, domestic workers, street vendors, construction workers. And we were the ones to decide that we don't need middle, upper class Desi men or lawyers or business owners or any self-appointed leader to come defend us and speak for us, and that we were enough and capable of getting our loved ones from detention, capable of speaking for ourselves, capable of learning to punch above our weight, and that no table was worth sitting at if the items on the menu were our own people. That summer after I joined DRUM's youth program, I had to leave for Dickinson College to the beautiful rural town of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And it was the kind of school where there were students coming from families who could afford to pay $50,000 a year, owned homes, several cars, lived in places where their average public school was equivalent of the best schools in New York City. So they were confused when I talked about the metal detectors, scanners, and security guards I had to go through every day at my school before I could even start my morning class, or how I could have been raised on food stamps with parents who still had to work full-time jobs. They lived lives that were just night and day different from my own and the people I grew up with. And these class differences made it hard for me to relate to other Desi students who were born here or were raised in America like myself. And I remember I was having a conversation with a Desi student, and we were just talking about our families. She was a daughter of a doctor, and when she learned what my mom and dad did for work, she said, "But you seem like you're just as smart as everyone else here. Are you sure you're not middle class?" I was sure. I was very sure. Because for me, I not only had to fight racism, but also classism from my own people. And race and class were inseparable for me, my family, and the people I grew up with, and the community I now organize. Which is why I came back to be an organizer with DRUM after college. And by organize, I mean community organizing, not organizing your closet or your desk. It's okay, we've all had to learn the difference and explain it to someone, in my case, usually my parents. So what is community organizing? My working definition is when directly impacted people come together to build power, to change systems. Typically, when people think of community organizing, the image that often comes to mind are of large, massive rallies that can stop traffic, shut down cities. But those mobilizations of people are really just part of organizing, and at times the finished product of successful organizing. No, organizing is all the unsexy, untweetable, uninstagrammable, hashtag-less work long before and long after those images I just described. Organizing is spending 4 hours straight on the street, outreaching in neighborhoods of people who have a problem that your organization is working to solve, speaking to these people, convincing them that joining your organization as a member is worth their time, building deep, caring relationships that can redefine who each of us are. Organizing is when through these relationships, people are brought into groups or organizations to participate in collective decision-making processes on campaigns around changes people want to see for the short term and the long term. And out of these processes, there are members who become leaders and future organizers and lifelong fighters for the movement of justice. It's been 14 years since I stepped into drum, and it continues to be quite a journey. This journey has included many people who have not only shared this journey with me, but have paved the road I'm walking on. And it's a road that I know many of you here do walk on, and I hope many more will join us in organizing. Some of the folks who stick out in this journey is the drum leader, Shahina, who joined because NYPD paid $100,000 to an informer to entrap her 19-year-old son in a fake terrorism case and sent him to prison for 34 years. She became the pioneer in building out a racial justice movement that exposed the way law enforcement preyed on vulnerable people in our communities in the name of national security. Another is Nadira, the fierce mother of 2 children whose husband was taken away by NYPD and handed over to immigration, and he was rotting away in a detention center for 18 months. That is until she decided to stop listening to the men in her family and joined organizing to pass a bill in our local city council to prevent undocumented people without criminal charges from being handed over to ICE by the police. And she later freed her husband. And nothing says fuck the patriarchy quite like that. And Kazi, the undocumented worker whose employer forced her to cross the street and she was run over by a cab. Despite having all the bones in her right arm crushed and then later fired by the same employer, she came back with the fury and vengeance to fight for full pay back from the time that she worked and was being paid $4 an hour for 14-hour workdays, causing a chain effect in several South Asian stores and restaurants throughout the city for Desi workers to start demanding minimum wage, filing back wage claims, and led to the first South Asian Worker Center. And of course, our youth member, Nilesh, who was repeatedly suspended at school and encouraged by his guidance counselor to just drop out because the school shouldn't have to put up with him anymore. Because so-called good students are more deserving of time, attention, and support than the bad apples. So he became a leader in the movement to end the school-to-prison pipeline and forced our Department of Education to reform our student discipline code to reduce suspensions, arrests, and summonses by half within a year of these changes. And there's Jensine, a youth leader who was raised by a single mother in public housing, started our Young Women's Gender Justice Leadership Program to battle toxic masculinity and gender-based violence, both in our community and the systems we're fighting against, and who at the age of 17 was already the kind of person and organizer I still hope to become. It has been 16 years since 9/11, but there are days, especially this year, where it feels like barely a day has passed since 9/11, where I wonder just how much has changed since then and how deja vu things can feel. Which is why I don't believe it is a coincidence that we have a sitting president that has openly called for a Muslim registry. I don't believe that it is a coincidence that the ghost of the Confederacy has found new life through Jeff Sessions and his dedication to expanding prisons, detention centers, to lock up members of our communities or remove us from this country like the inconvenience we are, or rather the inconvenient truths we are. The country has changed since then, it's true, but so have I. And so have many people who want to resist blind patriotism to actually make life better for all of us living in the United States and for people all around the world. If you are one of these people, I need you to organize. Not tomorrow, but yesterday. Because people on the front lines don't have the luxury of time. We have the necessity and urgency of now. And the urgency of now demands organizing. We need to be willing to go on the kind of journey that so many everyday people have taken to bring about the changes that we still benefit from today. Everything from public education to where we get to sit on the bus, to 8-hour workdays, to weekends, to no child labor, to clean drinking water, to ending of different wars, to the right to even exist. Everything is a result of people deciding to take the journey of organizing. And as I have watched the last 16 years pass, I am more certain that what will get us through the next 16 or 60 years will be because people decide to start their journey to organize. On not just the roads that already exist, but new and bigger paths we made for everyone to walk on together. Thank you.